Hey guys, so in today's video we're going to be going over instance fields in Java. In the previous video we talked about methods, and methods are how we make our object actually do stuff. Instance fields are how we store data about the object. So for example, every dog is going to have some basic information about them, like how old are they or what breed are they. This basic data could be stored in instance fields. And instance fields are basically variables, but there's something about them that makes them a little bit more special, and it's that we have to provide a access modifier. Remember that access modifiers are here, public or private. And public means anybody can access them from any class, and private means that they can only be accessed from within the class. Typically your instance fields should be private. It's best practice, because if you make them public, that means that anybody could change data about your object, and that could cause a lot of issues. So we put the access modifier, and then just like when we're creating a variable, we have to specify a data type. So let's say I'm going to have an instance field that will have the breed of my dog. That's going to be a string. And then the name of the variable. So here we've declared the variable. What's going to happen is when someone creates an instance of the dog class, when they make a dog object, later on they can pass in what kind of breed their dog is. And that means they'll set a value to this variable. But because it's private, they can't just do dog.breed equals golden retriever. That's where getters and setters come in. Getters and setters refer to a specific type of method where you can either retrieve the value that's inside a private instance field, or you can set a value to the private instance field. And this just helps in making sure that your data is secure and that someone can't set something random to your instance field. So later on, if we have something that's super secure, like a password or something, they can only set a new password if they know what the previous password was. Things like that. And that's what getters and setters allow for. But for right now, our getters and setters will be super simple. So here's how we make a getter, public, and then we have to specify the data type. So as the name sounds, a getter is when you can access the value that's inside the instance field. So in this case, the return type would be string. And typically, this is convention, but you don't have to. But the way that a getter's name is, it's going to be get and then the name of the variable. So in this case, get breed. And then we put our curly braces, and we simply just return breed. What this does is it returns whatever value is stored in the variable breed. Similarly, for setters, we can do public, and setters are always going to be void, because in this case, you're just setting a value to the variable. And then it'll be set breed, since we want to set a value to the breed variable. And in this case, we'll have to take in a parameter, which is what the user will pass in. They'll pass in what breed they want to set to their dog. So then we can say breed equals new breed. And what that would do is it'll retrieve whatever value is passed in and set it to the breed instance field. Here you could also do some kind of check, like let's say you want to make sure that every dog has a breed. So you could do some kind of check to make sure that whatever they pass in isn't empty. Cool, so we can have a variety of instance fields, like for example we could have a private int age, or we could have a private string color, or gender, whatever we want. We can have as many instance fields as we want. Now here's an important thing about instance fields to know, is that this variable is accessible throughout the entire class. And this refers to a really important concept in Java known as the scope of a variable. For example here, the user is passing in a number of how many years their dog is based on like the human year. So they're passing in a number, and that number is being stored in the variable human years. This variable, however, is only accessible within this method. That means if I try to do something with human years here, like let's say human years equals 5 for whatever reason, it'll give you an error because it's not there, it doesn't exist. Its scope is only within the method in which it's being used. Similarly, if I were to declare some variable in here, like int dog years, and then let's say I was going to do it like this, and then I would return dog years here instead of doing it in one line. I created this variable within the method human to dog years, so that means that it's only accessible within that method. So if I try to do something with dog ears in breed, it wouldn't allow me to do that. As you can see here, it'll give you an error because now that variable doesn't exist. So variables that are created within a method are referred to as local variables because they're only accessible within the method. What makes instance fields special is that they're accessible throughout the entire class. So I can refer to breed, age, or gender from any of the methods that are within this class. But because they're private, that means that they're only accessible in the dog class. That's their scope, which means if I were to go to my main method and try to do anything here, I wouldn't be able to do it. Which is why it's really important that when you have instance fields that you know are going to be changing, you have a getter and a setter for them. So here, let's say I made a new dog, and now I want to set a breed. Then I could say dog1.setBreed, and let's say I have a poodle. So now the instance field breed has a value of poodle, at least for the object dog1. If I were to make another dog, like let's say dog2, its breed is going to be right now nothing because we haven't given it a value. So maybe I have another dog and I want to set the breed to golden retriever. Cool. So we've gone over instance fields, we've gone over the scope and the general scope of a variable, and now there's one final thing to know about instance fields. Let's say that you're working with something that you know is never going to change. Like maybe for a dog, there might be some kind of value, like the rescue shelter they're at won't ever change. Once they're brought to our rescue shelter, they're with us until they're rehabilitated or someone adopts them. Right? So that's something that's not going to change. Their age might change, their breed will have to be set by the user, it'll be kind of dynamic. But for an instance field that's pretty much going to stay the same and you know what value it's going to be, you can use the final keyword. So let's say I have private string shelter, and it's going to equal our shelter. Maybe that's the name of our rescue shelter. We know that this shelter is never going to be changed, and we don't want anyone to change it. We don't want anyone stealing our dogs. That's where we use the final modifier. And what makes this shelter variable, it'll make it completely final, which means this value can't be changed anymore. So if I were to, let's say, go and bark and maybe try to change its value to their shelter, it won't work because our variable has been declared as final. So once it's given a value, it cannot be changed. The other thing is when you create a final variable, make sure you have to give it a value right then and there. As we see here, if I were to not give it a value at the time of declaration, it'll give us an error because a final variable has to be initialized at the time of declaration. Like here, I created the variables and then maybe gave them a value later on, which was fine. But because this variable is final, it has to be given a variable at the time you create it. Cool, so we just learned about instance fields, the scope of a variable, and the final keyword in Java. I'll see you guys in the next video.